the way Brene Brown describes some of these emotions in Atlas of the Heart to just kind of give you a roadmap to what those emotions are and what they feel like. So she says in page 54 of Atlas of the Heart, discouraged, resigned, and frustrated are also ways we feel when things aren't going or didn't go as desired. Here's a simple way to think about the differences between some of the emotional experiences. Disappointment. It did not work out how I wanted, and I believe the outcome was outside my control. Regretful. It didn't work out how I wanted, and the outcome was caused by my decisions, actions, or failure to act. Discouraged. I'm losing my confidence and enthusiasm about any future effort. I'm losing the motivation and confidence to persist. Resigned. I've lost my confidence and enthusiasm about any future effort. I've lost the motivation and confidence to persist. Frustrated. Something that feels out of my control is preventing me from achieving my desired outcome. Things to note here. Feeling discouraged and resigned is about effort rather than outcome. With discouragement, we're losing the motivation and confidence to continue with our efforts. With resignation, we've lost the motivation to keep trying. When I think about motivation and just being excited and compelled to complete something, I think many of us misunderstand the place of motivation and excitement in achieving our goals and creating results for ourselves. I recently shared something that I heard from my friend Samantha Sifring's podcast, and she said, excitement and motivation are fair weather friends. When you are in need of them to show up, they're actually sometimes gone. And I also loved this quote by Dr. Sasha Hines, and she says, motivation is like a late dinner date. Go ahead and start without it. So when you get those negative emotions like discouragement and frustration, it's so important to sit in those emotions and really ask yourself, am I losing motivation and confidence, or have I already lost it? And how do I pick back up? Sitting in those emotions and being so aware that life is indeed 50-50. Successful people have learned this and over, actually show up in their lives with the awareness, yes, there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs, and that's okay. I'm going to manage those ups and downs, and I'm going to get through it. Number 2 is indecision. When you are in indecision, the feeling of being stuck and saying you don't know, it just only creates a sense of you can't move forward, right? When you're undecided and you revel in just major confusion and, don't decide ahead of time that you want to actually get out of confusion. There's nothing wrong with confusion. In fact, Brene says, the concept of optimal confusion is key to understanding why confusion is good for us and why it's categorized as an epistemic emotion, an emotion critical to knowledge, acquisition, and learning. It turns out that confusion, like many uncomfortable things in life, is vital for learning. According to research, confusion has the potential to motivate, lead to deep learning, and trigger problem solving. A study led by Sidney DeMello found out that when we're trying to work through our confusion, we need to stop and think, engage in careful deliberation, develop a solution, and revise how we approach to the next problem, right? So she continues, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but how often do we observe people and ourselves dismissing new data or information that challenges our ideas in order to avoid confusion or the risk of being wrong? Right? If you ask me, stopping to think, engaging in careful deliberation, and revisiting old thinking are rare and courageous actions, and they require dealing with a healthy dose of confusion, and that's uncomfortable, right? Confusion, there's nothing wrong with being confused. The problem becomes when you decide to be undecided and stuck in confusion and don't make forward momentum. Number 3, the reason why we don't take action is lack of massive action. So massive action is the idea of taking action until you get to your result. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires you remain curious and you remain interested in what you're doing, and you try to just keep doing the thing even when it feels uncomfortable. Final quote that I'm going to share from Atlas of the Heart on this podcast is, maybe not, the idea that of no regrets doesn't mean living with courage. It means living without reflection. To live without regret is to believe we have nothing to learn, no amends to make, and no opportunity to be braver with our lives. So when you take massive action, you're really taking a risk of knowing that you may not get your result in the time that you wanted to, but you keep making forward momentum. When you are taking passive action, you just consume information. You really get caught up in shiny object syndrome. I need to take this other class, I need to read this other book, and you don't practice constraint. One of the things that I share with my coaching clients is when they get into, for example, reading a self-help book, in order to be able to get what you want out of that self-help book, you have to be willing to practice constraint. So what does constraint look like? Constraint means that you take that book that you're reading and you read it and you go through the topics, and then you decide that you are going to implement 3 to 5 things in that book before you embark on another book. And it might even take you a year, right? But a year of trying to implement what you learn from one book is so much better than reading 20 books and implementing nothing. One of the books that I did have to practice that type of constraint with was Atomic Habits by James Clear. I wanted to kind of conceptualize for myself what it looked like to create results in my life where I was creating atomic habits and I was being consistent about things. And what I ended up doing was assuring myself that I could practice restraint and not change a thing until I was able to complete what I had wanted to get out of that book. So the idea of for example, being a person who wakes up at a certain time of day, being a person that practices gratitude every day. And it took me a long time within this last year to implement a lot of those things. But being so constrained in that one book helped me so much kind of curate the life experience that I wanted to have.
I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you're listening to an excerpt from the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. You can listen to the whole episode wherever you get your podcasts, and look out for new episodes out every Monday. You're doing a great job, Mama. I'll see you next week. Bye now.